Life in the ACC, talking Notre Dame football with Ben Belden, who joins us on a regular basis, who covers Notre Dame. So you need to join him on Twitter. Has been covering the Irish for quite some time for a number of outlets. Ben, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well and excited to be back on the show. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So the Irish foray into the ACC. So this has gained, of course, much criticism, but it's an intriguing factor to an otherwise extremely odd and intriguing season. So this is just another layer with Notre Dame eligible for the ACC championship. So there's a game against USF in which they dominated 52-0 following the Duke win, in which that was a bit of a struggle into the third quarter at some point. So where are the highs and lows for you at this point of Notre Dame football through two games?
I mean, I think that, when you look at how they performed in their opener against Duke, that was a little bit lackluster. And then obviously they pulled away at the end. And I said on social media and other places that I wanted to see them start dominating teams. I mean, Duke was kind of their, I don't know if you would call it a mulligan, but their game to look a little bit rusty, and they did. And then they came out against USF and shut them out 52-0. And I sort of thought to myself, well, okay, like that's what we're looking to see in a game like that. And then, of course, unpredictable circumstances happened. I don't know really what the correct term to use, but and they had their game canceled with Wake Forest, scheduled bye week. Looking forward, is that rust still going to be there? So it looked like Notre Dame was, doing the right things at the beginning of the season to develop some positive momentum, because they've kind of got bigger fish to fry later on in the season. And then now it almost feels like they're back to square one. I guess we'll sort of see how far they got pushed back when they play Saturday night.
Yeah, outside of Houston coming to mind, who didn't play forever, they went through like 5 potential possible opponents before they could get onto the field. I think Notre Dame's maybe the poster child of what could happen to a schedule in regards to getting on the field, playing those first 2 games, and then Wake Forest gets canceled, pushed back, and now they're not on the field for what is going to be 3 weeks before they hit the field. Florida State in South Bend on Saturday night. So yeah, it almost becomes a mini spring camp preparing for game 3. So it is Florida State, Notre Dame. So your thoughts about what you saw there in the first 2 games, just in regards to, if you survey the offense and the defense, who stood out and where are you concerned?
Yeah, I mean, I think always the biggest concern with Notre Dame's offense is how Ian Book's going to play. And so, week 1 looks pretty rusty. I mean, just missed on a couple throws that you would expect a quarterback that's in its 5th year at the university to make. I mean, one throw sticks out. There was a screen pass, and he threw a 100-mile-an-hour screen pass essentially, and the blocking was set up, and it would have gone for 50, 60, 70 yards, to be honest with you. And so, I mean, on one hand, you're concerned with that. On the other hand, you kind of think, well, with enough continuity, that type of thing's going to fix itself as he kind of starts to get his feet wet again, I suppose. But then, of course, like I say, now you've got the mini spring camp, kind of like you sort of said. So that's kind of what it feels like. I don't know. And Ian Book looked better against USF, still not perfect. And like I say, I viewed that USF game as just another, just got a incrementally better, and they did. And it was great. And there's been no complaints on the defense so far. But like I say, with everything, Ian Book, the offense, the defense, all that type of stuff, it's just kind of, it's hard to talk about because you just don't know what that layoff's going to do. I mean, defensively, they've played tons of defensive linemen. They were rotating. In the first game, I think they played like 10 defensive linemen total. Meaningful snaps, which was awesome. I mean, you love to see that depth and that development. Against USF, they made more of a point to get more guys in the defensive backfield back there. They also had a couple guys out because of, well, they didn't say it was COVID related, but it probably was. And then given afterwards, I'm sure it was. So, the depth defensively, it's almost hard to even just talk about one person. The depth has been great. And so, again, you never know from week to week what it's going to look like for Notre Dame, especially given what's happened. And I don't know, but I guess it's good that they've showed that depth early, because it shows that they can lose a couple guys and still perform pretty well.
To your point, when people across the nation, including myself, saw the I'm going to stop right there. Big edit right there. I had about 10. I had about 10 almonds before we started, and they just lodged right. All right. Ben, to extend on your point to a certain extent, myself and a number of college football fans saw the score against South Florida, didn't necessarily see the game for good reason, but 52-0, and just kind of brushed it aside. But again, to your point, they did what a dominant team should do. They didn't win that game like other teams will, like by 14 or 17 points. They put the throttle down. They crushed them. Florida State, in name only, presents what we would consider to be a big game. Florida State, Notre Dame. Oh, wow. No, Florida State's looking rather ragged themselves. They lost by 6 touchdowns to Miami. And now, so there's a game coming to South Bend in which we would expect Notre Dame, as what many would consider the second best team in the conference, to be playing a Florida State team that couldn't take care of Georgia Tech, and had a 14-point deficit against Jacksonville State before they pulled that game out last weekend. So despite some talent, of course, on that roster, here's another opponent that, for the eyeball test, Notre Dame should be able to win easily.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it to a couple others that it's obviously going to take a pretty big collapse. It's going to take Notre Dame beating themselves for that to happen, I think. I mean, you're going to have to, we're talking multiple turnovers and big plays, because, you know, if you've watched Florida State at all, and I know a lot of people have, that they'll sort of surprise. I mean, you'll sort of start to think, at least I do, that, okay, like, you know, you can sort of see some stepping stone type things happening here. They look pretty good for 2 or 3 plays, and then it's just some sort of terrible turnover, or just something, a muffed punt, or just something to take all of the wind out of their sails. And so that's just kind of where Florida State is right now. I mean, I think every program at one point or another can kind of think about a time where that maybe was the case. So, you know, for Notre Dame to lose, it's going to take, you know, Notre Dame self-destructing in a way that, you know, Florida State usually has so far this season to a certain degree. So I don't know. I'm not looking at, you know, it's another situation where I'm not looking at if Notre Dame's going to win. It's just, how are they going to look in the win, assuming, like I say, that they don't just do something unthinkably bad and self-destruct themselves and lose to a bad Florida State team.
So in that original schedule, before the Clemson game was the Wisconsin game and the USC game. But in looking at what they face before the Clemson game now, unless they trip up, and I don't even necessarily say in a loss, whether that be a loss, certainly against the likes of Florida State, Louisville, Pitt's a good team, Georgia Tech, that would be rather surprising. But even if they just squeak by those games, they're winning them in a lackluster fashion, that's going to tell us something to a certain extent. But we're at a point in the college football season where we're into October and we don't know a whole lot about anybody yet. There have been very few meaningful games. And for Notre Dame, unless the unexpected happens on the negative side, we're not going to know whether this team is ready for what you Notre Dame fans have been talking about a lot, and specifically to me when we've had you on, Ben, and that's, is this team going to take that next step? And it's going to happen against Clemson, which is, from the time that the schedule was put together, was the hallmark game. But with Wisconsin and USC being barometers as well, those have been removed. And so it's basically just holding serve until Clemson.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, there's a little bit of give and take with that schedule, like you said. I mean, before it was kind of like, how are we going to navigate the schedule with all of these, you know, difficult opponents on it? Wisconsin obviously being one, and, you know, USC is a rivalry game, and so on and so forth. But, you know, now it's like everything points to Notre Dame and Clemson on November 7th. And I don't know, as you were kind of talking there, I was like, I'm sort of sitting here thinking like, wow, that's a good point. Now I'm a little bit scared because Notre Dame isn't going to be tremendously tested. I mean, Pittsburgh always plays them tough. Louisville will be an interesting one because they seem to, you know, give Notre Dame a little bit of trouble, at least historically. But, Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a great point that Notre Dame will be largely untested, you know, in terms of anything that approaches a marquee type of a matchup until, you know, Clemson comes to South Bend, 7:30 November 7th.
Yeah, it's like unless they beat all these teams 70-0, that Notre Dame's basically going to arrive at the Clemson game being exactly what we thought they were. And if they're
Yep.
not, then it's to the negative side, because otherwise they really can't prove anything beyond what we already think they are, which is one of the 10 or 12 best teams in the country, at least. All right, Ben, we appreciate you stopping by to break down in Notre Dame. Certainly have at it if you've got anything else for us to look out for in this Florida State game.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add real quick that, like, after the Duke game, like I said, it was a people were concerned. Let's put it that way. And then that concern sort of goes away with 52-0. And then now the concern, it sort of feels like it's right back. I mean, we'll sort of see. Like I say, maybe that concern gets put to bed pretty quickly Saturday night. I would like to think it would be. And, you know, it looks like Notre Dame, like, you know, you could argue that to look at some film and get your legs back and let other teams beat up on each other or whatever. And maybe you think that COVID has kind of run through your team now, and now you've got the herd immunity or whatever. I don't know. I'm trying to look for the bright spots, but it's just a weird college football season for a lot of teams. And I think that, you know, certainly Notre Dame has not been exempt from that by any means.
And to a certain extent, it's a weird aspect of college football any season, because if you root for what is supposed to be a contender, it's like you almost can't be happy week to week, because you've got like 3 games that you're gunning for that you think, okay, we could lose that one, or this team's supposed to be better, that this is our, but the rest of them are like, well, we're supposed to win that. We're supposed to win that. We're supposed to win that. You go for 3 and 4 and 5 weeks at a time, just thinking, that was nice. We won 52-14, but we were supposed to do that. So on to the next one. And you can't really be happy as a fan of an elite program, because you got like 3 games a year that you're really serious about.
Absolutely.
But that's the deal in college football. Ben, we appreciate you stopping by. Obviously have to track the Irish and this interesting dynamic to the season with Notre Dame playing in the ACC for a championship, possibly. We will catch you soon. Enjoy the game Saturday night.